Hello, I'm here with Amy Shaw. We're going to be talking through some of her photography and some of her experiences, not only over the past couple of weeks and months with the Nikon Z9, but also just some of her general photography experiences. Try and get out a couple of insightful tips and a couple of things that you do when it comes to your photography as well, right? So hopefully this is just a really nice conversation between us, and you guys at home will get some really insightful information about what Amy shoots and how she does it. So for the people at home, just a quick introduction about what it is that you do, what your style of photography is, and who you are.
Okay, so I am an automotive and lifestyle photographer, and I've been doing this now for about 8 years. Originally, I started off shooting weddings, as many of us do, but for me, that made me understand, how to work with light, how to photograph people, and I love photographing people. I'm a people person, so it kind of worked out really well for me. And then my career turned into cars, which I don't know. It's amazing how that happened, but basically I've been doing just cars for probably the last 6 years or so. I did weddings and cars for the first couple of years, and then something about cars. I don't know if it's about the travel, the adventure, just the absolute joy that they can bring, and everybody in the car world is just, we're all a little bit crazy because nobody really drives around classic cars, or just because they think it's the best way to get from A to B or anything like that would do it, because they're a little bit fun and they do break down and they've got great stories and great character about them. So that's when my passion for photography was first, and then it turned into the passion for cars. So but because I've always had that the love for people as well, my work is a lot more, I would say, people have described it as journalistic or reportage. It's definitely about the people as much as it is about the cars and anything about the stories. So some of my favorite shoots are road trips. One where you've got, for me, because they're jobs, they're often strangers that I meet on day one, and I think, right, well, you and me, we're going to be in this car now through 13 countries over the next 2 weeks. Yeah. Let's go. So, and you never forget those people. They will always be your friend, even if you don't see them for years later. So that is what I love about photography, and especially the car world. And when it comes to shoots where we primarily focus on the cars, if I'm shooting for either for a car company or a magazine, anything where there's people involved as well, I'm always going to make sure that I try and capture that, mainly because that's what I enjoy. I love that side of the photography as well. So yeah, anything that like the shoot where we did with the Z9 with Lotus, that was awesome for me because I got to shoot these amazing cars. But not only that, I photographed all you guys, and I wanted to make sure that I was trying to tell the story of us being there and the people at Lotus. That for me was all about it. The whole thing, rather than just here is a picture of a car.
Yeah.
I think that's hopefully answered your question.
Yeah, no, I think that's a brilliant answer. A couple of things I want to dive a little bit deeper into there. You said that the way that you fell into photographing cars was an interesting story.
Yes.
I'm keen to know a little bit more about that, because I know that your dad was obviously really involved in the car industry as well. So I feel like there maybe was a little bit of a connection there before you kind of found the photography side of things.
Yes, absolutely. And especially a connection to Lotus, which is something that meant a lot to me, to be able to, use the Z9 at this iconic place for me personally, not just generally my work and my passion. So my dad used to work for Team Lotus Formula One back in the 80s, and anybody that's into cars will know that was one of the best eras of racing, I think, for Formula One. And with Senna, it was amazing. I wasn't there at the time, but it was some of the images that my dad would bring back, because he loved photography, so he would always carry his camera with him when he was in the pit lanes, and some of the photographs, even now I'm like, oh, that was really cool. And then basically he went into classic car restoration, and friends of his had built this replica Ferrari P4, and for non-car people, it's a very, very beautiful Ferrari. It's got these stunning lines, and even if you're not into cars, it's one of these machines that you can look at and appreciate it from an artistic point of view. It's you don't even have to look at the engine. You'll think, wow, that's a beautiful piece of art in front of me on wheels. So when these people asked me if I could photograph this car, I thought, well, I've never photographed a car before. I Googled, the night before I Googled how to photograph a car, how do car photographers photograph a car. I'd only ever shot weddings. So, I think the only lens I had was my 50mm Nikon 1.8, and that was it. And I can't even remember, I think my original camera is a Nikon D600. That was my early camera that I used, my first big full frame camera. So I had this one lens, one camera, and I thought, right, well, I'll just photograph it like I would a wedding. So I looked for, the nicest angles. For me, not knowing at the time anything about cars was, if anything, more beneficial, I say now. Because I tried to look at the car purely from a visual point of view. I didn't know that, for example, the engine was this, that, the other. I didn't look at it from trying to fit the whole machine in my frame, for example. It purely was thinking, okay, well, that rear wheel, just from this profile shot, is a beautiful line, and the way the light is catching that, it's stunning. So I kind of looked at it from a much, like a step back view, I would say. And that's, but whilst I was on that shoot photographing just technical details more than anything, that's what they wanted, some general shots, and then the technical stuff. I photographed when we had lunch, and then when they were pushing the car out, and all these little bits in between. And I thought, I quite like this. This is a full story. And then those photographs ended up going viral online. And that was, since that day, I've never had such a spike of statistics on my website before.
Wow.
So I was like, whoa, what's happening here? So that was cool. But from there, I picked up my first couple of clients. But in the same kind of time period, in about 6 weeks of this time period, I photographed an amazing wedding, which ended up getting picked up by wedding blogs. And I also photographed, again, if you're into cars, you'll know the Goodwood Revival, which is an amazing event, even if you're not into cars, just to photograph from a photography point of view, because you feel like you've stepped back in time. It's everybody, like I think there's 100,000 people that go to this event, and they are all dressed up in 1940s, 50s, 60s clothing. And the cars that are raced are some of the most amazing cars that ever exist. And being able to be there for 3 days and photograph, and it's September, so the light is nice, and you've got all the people dancing. Oh, it's just the whole thing. You don't even have to look at the racing to be able to enjoy that event. So I photographed this event purely for fun, because my dad was like, hey, you kind of like cars, you like photography, you'll like this event. And I was like, cool. So, perfect match, exactly. So we went together. We'd been a couple of times before, and these 3 events happened in the same period of time, and they each kind of set off my own career. So, and that's how I ended up being a photographer of weddings for 2 years, as well as cars for the same 2 years. And then it got to a point where I thought, well, I now need to decide which one, because I've got some amazing car events like the Le Mans Classic, but I've already got a wedding that booked in 18 months ago over the same weekend. So that was a little bit tough. And that was always a balance. So at the time I thought, well, I'm going to have to give up the safety of the weddings and try and take on the cars, which, anybody doing this professionally is quite, will understand that it's weddings are wonderful because they are fun. They're a lot of work, but they pay well, and you can also you can see your work for quite a long time, coming up. Anything like cars, I look at my calendar and I'm like, okay, I am so busy for the next 2 or 3 months, and then after that I have nothing. And I'm like, I know the work will come, but it's waiting for that. So that's, I think, a challenge a lot of photographers have. But you just have to have faith that work will come. And so, I mean, it's the same with weddings, especially if you're starting out. You think, I really hope that somebody likes my work and would like to hire me. And so, but once you get going, you kind of get used to that. And but it also makes you never stop trying, because you think, oh, at any point this could stop, and then you just think, I need to make sure that I carry on being passionate about this. I try my hardest. I can't get lazy with this. And that's the same with anything where you're creating something for yourself, or you're working for yourself, which I find quite exhilarating, stressful at times, but more exhilarating because it makes you live life a little bit more on the edge, because you think, okay, maybe I should do that shoot, because I've never tried that before. This sounds exciting, and it's trying to find, especially in the early days of being a photographer, you have to find that balance between not working so much that you just want to cry all the time and thinking I'm crying all the time because I'm not working enough. So it's the balance of tears. And then there's this beautiful equilibrium in the middle. And so, I mean, sometimes everybody knows the balance gets a little bit skew. So as we all know, probably for the last couple of years, that's been a little bit up in the air. So photographers have had to, like myself included, it's been wonderful to have life slow down a little bit. But at the same time, it's trying to think, okay, well, maybe I should diversify a little bit or see what else I like to photograph. And so for me, that's changed in different parts of my own career. And I've done a lot more things like teaching or podcasts, which I never knew how much I enjoyed until I started doing them.
Yeah.
So that's been exciting. But I know of friends of mine who have, were shooting weddings, and then they've decided to start shooting wildlife because they're like, this is wonderful. I had nothing to do, and then I love this. So I think it's all about trying to take what you are passionate about, or the way that you want to live your life, and how you're passionate about that. So for me, my dream job as a teenager was, if somebody said to me as a 16-year-old, Amy, what do you want to do when you're older? And I think I said, I would love to travel the world and take pictures, but that's never going to happen because nobody can do that. Like, I'd never met a photographer that did the job that I thought I would like to do. And when I think I met one photographer in the past, and they basically told me how difficult it was to be a photographer. And I thought, maybe this isn't a good career choice. But at the same time, the minute that you start doing something purely for passion, there's often ways that you think, okay, I can make a little bit of cash doing this, and just you don't mind if you're, when you're starting, if you're not making much money, because you just think, I love doing this. Like, there's nothing that there's no pressure necessarily, because I think some of my earliest weddings I did for such a little amount, but it gave me such a lot of experience at the time. I was terrible. Those photographs are not good. They definitely got what they paid for. So that, we at least we had that agreement going on. But at the same time, it got me my understanding of what I needed, what I enjoyed, and I knew I loved shooting people. And then when it came to the travel, I never even thought cars were a thing. Nobody had ever said to me, "Oh, hey, thought about being a car photographer." I would have thought that sounds boring, because at the time I wasn't interested in cars.
No.
I thought that to photograph cars was in a studio with lots of lighting. You had no creativity in terms. This is what I thought. I now, knowing studio car photographers, I know that they are magicians. But for me, it was something completely different. I didn't understand the job, and I think especially for teenagers and young adults, or not even anybody that doesn't understand the depth of a job that they think that they don't realise that they will enjoy, is sometimes quite difficult. So it's trying to explain what I do to some people. They're like, oh, do you really love cars then? And I'm like, well, I do now, but I didn't when I started. So it's definitely something that I've learnt to love, and my style has changed over that time. The way that I shoot changed over that time, especially as I've learnt about not only cars, but my own photography has improved. I didn't start off, I look at my old images now and I can see what I was trying to do, and I can still see my style in some of those images, that I was shooting. Now I only ever shoot in RAW. And the only reason why I now shoot in RAW is because I did a wedding with somebody who was doing it full time. And they said, hey, what camera setting are you on? And I was like, oh, I'm just shooting in JPEG. And they're like, shoot RAW. And I thought, oh, I've never shot RAW before. But there's a time in the past where either you research this and you find this out and you learn, or somebody tells you. So throughout the years that you are a photographer, you learn so much. I expect I will continue to learn, and it will be from technology such as the Z9 that will change the way that you shoot. And this will continue. My work, your work, we will end up changing the way that we shoot and the images that we produce because of the technology that comes through, or the inspirations that we find, the experience that we have. And I think that's something that I don't know if you, like, imagine trying to do it with painting. I don't know, maybe if you get better paints or different paints. Different brushes, or different mediums.
Different canvases.
There we are. Yeah. It shows how much I know about painting.
I'm not a painter. No.
But for at least photography, we can say that, it will always be developing. So sometimes I look at my work even from 5 years ago and I can see a difference. And I hadn't really understood the change that I did at the time, but you look at your old work and you think, oh no, I have changed. I prefer it's good job. I prefer what I'm shooting now, rather than in terms of the way of shooting, rather than some of the old images, and that will always continue. So yeah.
And so there's definitely one thing that kind of really sparked out at me there, is that those weddings that you have shot. Mm-hmm. and now you're not doing weddings anymore, but you're full time. You're all about cars, and like you say, people say, "Oh no, you must love cars." I definitely feel like the experiences and everything that you've learned from that wedding photography is really evident in your car photography, and that's kind of where, like you said at the start, your kind of reportage journalism approach, I think, comes from your car photography, and adding all the people in and stuff like that, because you're effectively shooting a wedding. But between a person and their car.
Yes.
And, would you agree with that? Is that the way that you feel that it kind of works?
Yeah, there are definitely ways that you can relate the wedding photography to the car photography, because it's basically, you're still telling a story, just instead of a bride and groom, there's a car that takes center stage, and you're still looking for little moments. Like when shooting weddings, you might look for that moment that, I know, bride and groom are sitting, listening to their speeches, and he just touches the shoulder of his new wife, and you just that touch, that little moment there, you think, oh, that's a nice shot. And the same with a car. You notice when they're driving, the way that you might come around a corner and the sun will hit just the hand on the steering wheel, or just the top of their wrist, and you think, oh yeah, that's a really nice moment. You're still looking for the same moments, but it's a different kind of love. And in terms of long trips, like road trip stories, that's where I find that the most interesting photographs come out, because suddenly you're not just being told, here is a car, go and find some nice locations, bring me back some nice pictures. You don't know what is going to happen on a road trip. So you never know what gear I need to bring. I've now got it down, but like, there was sometimes I'm driving the car as well, so I'll have my cameras on my lap driving away, and then we'll stop, and then I'll take a couple of shots, but my cameras literally never leave me on road trips. And I think I even put them on like the point where I walk out of wherever we slept that night, and I'll have cameras on, and they will not go back into my bag. I don't think they ever really go into my bag again until after dinner. So I will photograph people having dinner, and there's nothing to do with the cars. And to be honest, at the time of shooting it, I don't really care if those photographs, my client's going to use them or not. I'm taking them purely because I want to, and I like that part of the story. And often, if people work with me, they like that stuff as well. So they do end up getting put into either books or calendars, as certain products, or just social media stories. And it's nice for me to know that they've noticed those things as well. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I'm glad that you appreciate that notice. Especially some of those smaller moments that are storytelling. I call them filler shots, because they're always the little moments that you may notice. They're not the big, like, this is amazing, this is a car and this beautiful scenery. It's the hand on the wheels, the little tiny touch, especially if somebody has had that car, or it's an emotional connection to that car. Going back to the relation to the weddings as well, the minute you have that emotional connection, they will act differently with that car, and the way that they will appreciate the photographs afterwards as well. And so I've got a really good photograph of this lady, which it's a photograph. She's sitting on the side of a Jag, like when the door is open, it's like the sill that you sit on. And it's quite sweet. It's from the Goodwood Revival, so she's in this big fur coat, and she looks very glamorous, but it's raining, and she looks miserable. Like, her face is really miserable. And I was running up to the other end of the track, basically, and I spotted her, and I thought, oh, that's a great shot. And I knelt down, I took one frame, and then I smiled at her, and she kind of like laughed afterwards, and then I ran off again. I didn't catch her name or anything like that, but being in the car world, everybody knows everybody else. So I ended up looking at this photograph and thinking, oh, I really like that, actually. There's a couple of people in the background with an umbrella, so you could tell this part of the story. And I said to social media, I said, does anybody know who this lady is? And thankfully, a couple of people were like, oh, this is she's called Andrea. And so I sent Andrea a message, and I said, oh, hey, I've got this photograph of you. I really like it. Would you like a copy? And she said that, I really love that photograph, because she laughs at it because she's quite a happy person. Yeah. And then she said, this was my first time at this event after my husband, who owned the car, had died. Wow. And so for her, she was actually a little bit sad, but generally she's a wonderful, happy person. And since then, I've noticed the way that because again, keep seeing these people, I've noticed the way that she interacts with the car. So this event happened very recently, and I've got a photograph of her hand, and it's her left hand, so she's still got her wedding ring on, and she's still, got the rings, and she's touching the car. It's just this light little touch. She's not going to push the car or anything like that. It's just almost like when you're sat next to your new husband, wife, and you just gently just touch them. It doesn't have to be I'm going to hug you all the time kind of thing. It's that gentle connection with that person, that object, whatever. So for me, it's always trying to find those little moments. And it's when people have had a connection with a car, that's always not necessarily more of them, but just they're special. They're not just I am driving this car for you for this shoot. This is my car I've had for 10 years, or my dad had it, or whatever. That's always the difference. And I try to make sure that the photographs I get are capturing those moments. I try.
And there's definitely a thing you mentioned there about your filler shots that I really wanted to ask about. So one of the things that we tend to find that some people can get concerned about, especially if they're starting out as a pro photographer, like they might get a brief from a client, or they might get an idea about something that they want, that the client wants them to take a picture of, and then as they're starting out as a pro, they feel like they have to shoot that line by line, make sure they get everything that the client's asking for, but yet you then don't really take the pictures that you want to take. And I feel like your filler shots are the shots that you really love, and it's also then amazing that the clients love those as well. And I don't think that's ever a bad thing, right? It's never a bad thing to have those shots that you thoroughly enjoy taking. Otherwise you might fall out of love with the photography you do. And
I think everybody gets to a point where they fall out of love with photography, even before they become professional or whilst they're professional. I know when I was, I wasn't a professional at this point, but I got to a point where I thought, I'm just not taking any pictures. I'm not particularly enjoying it. Shall I just sell my cameras? And you kind of look at them and you think, well, maybe I'll keep them for a bit, or there's this, family gathering I want to photograph. And you definitely have to, for me, it was getting back into photographing things that I loved and people that I loved. It's, if you're ever stuck with photography, for me, I shoot cars all the time, and I have done for 8 years now. So when I go on holiday, my personal holidays, people might say, do you just get away from cars? Do you want to just completely escape from them? And sometimes, yes, I do. Sometimes it gets to a point where I'm just like, I don't want to pick up my camera. I don't want to shoot a car. I have felt that as a professional as well. But the minute that I don't bring my camera, you bet that there will be a point that I will think, I think one Christmas I thought, right, I'm just going to not bring a camera. I was exhausted. I'd overworked myself. I thought, I'm not going to bring a camera. And then the minute, Christmas, my family open presents, there's laughter, there's, grandma has got the pot off the potatoes and it's steaming away, and I'm like, that'd be a really nice shot. And then I pick up my dad's camera and just to get a couple of shots. So it can be down to photographing the things that you love. So again, like with saying my holidays, it's quite sad. I go on holiday on my own in my own car. I'll go and sometimes I'll bring my other half with me as well, but we will always take a classic car of sorts. Most of the time it's our own, or we might borrow one, and I will photograph that car because I love it. And it becomes not necessarily the car itself, but our holiday that we're on, or if it's just me and my car, then I will, I'll stop and photograph that car just because I want to, because that's an image that I love, because that is my car that I've had now for 10, 11 years. And suddenly that image means so much more to me personally. And then I think, oh yeah, I do love my job. I've got a great job. So, thankfully, I don't dislike my job really at all. There naturally, any job in the world, if you were like the world's best ice cream taster, and that's just your job, there'll be a point at some point that you probably get fed up of ice cream.
Ice cream, yeah.
I don't know when that would happen, but
no, it'd take a while.
It might take a while. But it gets to the point you think, you know what? I'll just take a little step back from ice cream for a bit, and then I'll go back to it. And I'll, you realize that you do love it. But anything where people are like, from the people that I work with, they are like, you must have the best job in the world. Can't deny, I feel like I have got the best job in the world, but there's still, it's funny, it's almost like when you have a job that you thoroughly enjoy, or, photography is often looked at as something easy, or, you just take pictures. And I still get told that now. And you have to say, well, yes, and it's wonderful, and I will not deny that. But the actual taking photographs part is a very, very small slither of the job itself. And it's usually not that bit that gets you down. If you're ever down about your photography or your work, it's the rest of it. It's the the admin, the business side of things. So when you can take a break and just get back to the thing that you love, the reason why you do that, of shooting that thing that you love, or whether it's wildlife, landscapes, or just, general street photography, people, that is when you think, actually, no, I do love what I do, and it's I can just manage the rest of this that I'm struggling with, and that, it will all be fine. And yeah, you fall back in love with it all over again. And I think this will always happen for the rest of my life, at least.
You'll always love it.
I can't ever imagine shooting anything but cars and people involved. Like, I'll give something else a go, but that's where my love lies, on motorbikes as well.
So let's start talking about how you photograph cars. Earlier on, you mentioned about, you're looking for those really tiny details. You're looking for the way the light falls as a car goes around a corner. And I think, this is a really good example to bring in this shot here. Now, obviously, we've got this really nice light that's casting across onto the wheel arch of the car that's in front of us. This is coming from the headlight from the car behind, right?
Yes.
So just give us a talk through this shot. Like, how did you picture this shot? How you've taken it, getting the light, getting the badging on the car in the foreground. Just talk us through that.
So naturally, being in the UK, we don't get like the most amazing sunlight.
No.
I mean, you know what? In some days we do, but it's often that we have a grey day. It's a bit rainy, and shooting on a racetrack, they're not usually the most exciting. So I thought, right then, what am I going to work with? I thought, well, the minute that I get that, I think headlights. Headlights are always the thing that will spark a car to life. And the minute we started going around the track, and I thought, look at the way, just by physically half leaning out of the car, noticing the light which was following the side of the car. And so I said to my driver, I said, can we just stick slightly to the right of the track, and we'll ask him behind to stick a little bit out to the left, just to basically make sure that it wasn't one directly behind the other. So it had this little offset, which meant that this light would fall onto the side of the car. It's definitely things you can plan and think about, but sometimes you can plan and plan and plan, and then by the time you get there, it just doesn't work the way you think it is. So
and the light's changed.
The light has changed, or the light might be better, and you might have planned for a terrible weather day, and it's suddenly amazing. So it's often about, for me, I like to get there and work with what I've got directly in front of me, because I think I could lose so much time and sleep over trying to plan some of these things. So you have a rough idea and you think, okay, I'm going to try and do a bit of this, bit of that, and then we'll see what happens. So you've got certain tricks, such as keeping headlights on for cars to be able to add those little bits of light and warmth, especially if you're shooting in a slightly low light area. The minute, I think actually nearly all the photographs that I've got from this shoot of cars with headlights, because that's the other thing. Some cars, like racing cars, don't often have headlights. So trying to bring them to life is a little bit different. You often, we'll probably look at another photograph in a moment, where colour is always the thing that I'll look for. So for me, I'll look for three aspects. There'll be, for example, this one. So the colour in this one I was thinking, right, okay, the red tyres look awesome. I can use those as like a leading line, and then the car itself having those bright yellow wheels definitely worked. But it's working with what you have at the time. So colour is one for me, and then light, and then composition generally shapes what you're seeing. If you can have all of those things, I was going to say some of the best images, but that's a complete lie. It's helpful when you've got all of those things, because you've got everything to play with.
Yeah.
In England, we often don't have the light, so that sometimes I have to not have that. So I'm looking instead for especially shape and colour, or if there's no colour, such as if it's a really rainy day and I don't know, everybody is in different colours, which is like not that great, and it's a mash of colours. I think, okay, well, let me just go back to pure black and white. If I'm going to put this picture into black and white, what shapes am I looking for? Where are the little bits of highlights, even if it's a cloudy day, or if you're shooting at night? That's for me where I feel like my work, I really get excited, because you're having to hunt for light and those shapes, and so suddenly you haven't got the freedom of being able to shoot everywhere at every angle. You have to really think about it, and I find that quite an exciting challenge. So when it comes to shoots like this, I have a general idea, but often it's not until I'm there, I'm physically walking around and I'm thinking, okay, that's cool. Because, I mean, sure, you could send a location scout to every shoot beforehand to step around every bit of the track or different backdrops. And in some big productions, yes, that's what they do, and they pick the locations that they think will work. But when we're shooting for editorial magazines, little shoots, that's never going to be an option. So, yeah, again, sometimes I'll plan locations, which is different. So I'll scroll over like Google Maps trying to find I'll look for things like bridges, and because I think, okay, if there's bridges, then that might be quite nice. Is a road nearby underneath, or pubs. I definitely look for pubs because they're usually the oldest part of the village or the town, and often they have like beautiful hanging baskets, and I think, okay, that could be quite nice. So you end up looking for certain things. Railways, they're always quite cool because the railway under arches are always quite cool. So it's just about looking for certain locations that you think would work, but until you're physically there, you never know. So on my Google Maps app, I have all these pins all over the world, actually, primarily the UK, of places where I've just been driving through, like the sun has just caught this building beautifully. I'm like, oh, that could be a great location, and I'll pin it and I'll write on it, great for morning light shots. So if I'm ever in that location, that area for a shoot, I've got some places that I know work. So it makes my job a little bit easier.
Well, I do the same thing, but for landscape photography.
Do you?
So I have Google Maps with all the little pins for landscape locations. So
I think it's technology. We may as well use it to our advantage.
Exactly.
I mean, we can get a map out, a physical map, and pin everything, but it's when you've got time is the essence. It's you don't always have that opportunity.
I was going to go back to this picture here where you were talking about color.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I was with you when you took this shot
Yes,
at
you were.
Lotus, and it was a very flat.
It was a very flat day.
Very flat, overcast day. There was nothing really going on with the lighting in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
So, in those situations, would you say that looking for a pop of color is kind of your backup?
Yes.
Is that what you look for?
Absolutely, because you can think about shooting things in black and white, but often my clients will say, no, these will be color photographs, so you have to assume that everything will be in color, and if it works in black and white, cool. So you can't always use that as your backup. So when it comes to looking for color, the minute that I see a pop of color of sorts, you kind of you gravitate towards that, like you would do with light. If you see, I don't know, like a golden hour light just shard coming through a certain point, you're like, let's go and see what subject's there, or something like that. So you end up gravitating towards that amazing light. And it's the same with color as well. It has to be a certain type of color. Like the minute somebody wears like a bright red, I don't know, waterproof jacket, it's not quite the same. So because it's also about patterns as well. So if you look at this image, the repeating pattern of the circles of the tires next to the very linear coloured lines, and suddenly my subject on that fits. It's not like you've lost the subject in that photograph. It actually works quite well. Some of the hardest decisions that I have to make, because I'm actually not very good at making decisions. I don't like it. I don't enjoy it. So when it comes to things like studio photography, I don't do it because, first of all, it's not the way I like to work, but also I hate making decisions. So that's all about decision making and control. And I like the lack of control of anything because I'm like, let's just see what we get. And so for me, placement of the car can sometimes be difficult because, for me to put that car there, I thought, I've got to get two guys to come over here to push that car forwards, turn the wheel and go backwards again a couple of times. And the more indecisive I am, the more times I have to kindly ask these two people to help me out. And I always feel a bit guilty. So it's maybe that's an emotional thing I need to work on. but so for me, that's sometimes difficult because I'm like, okay, well, that car, because the other thing is the subject, in this case, the car, will look good in multiple places. Yeah. So to try and think, okay, that it is good there, I will leave it there, rather than thinking, will it be a lot better if I moved it, or shall I just leave it there? And so that can sometimes be the most difficult bit. But I liked the way that it was almost half, because the car is half green, half yellow. I liked having it halfway on the half green, half yellow. So that was for me one of my decisions for that. And I also look for things like spacing. So I wanted to try and make sure, like even now, I reckon I could probably do it a little bit better, like cropping the space between the rear wheel and the red tires.
Yeah.
and the front wheel and the edge of the frame. I've tried to make that kind of the same space, but now I'm thinking from the edge of the frame, I should have maybe given it a bit more space. But, I mean, you can if you ever look at your own photographs, you can end up criticizing them so much. So the safest option is just not to.
And like from my point of view, like the most interesting thing for me is that the car is maybe 25% of the shot.
Yes.
Like the tires easily take up like the vast majority of the shot, but it still really works. And that's visible like in a lot of your work. The car is not necessarily always the biggest thing in the frame. There's generally a lot of other stuff that's going on around at the same time. Yeah,
I mean, I always try to use some form of leading line, whether is that, let's say, I mean, if we have a look, there's another photograph that's quite a low. This one, that's it. So that it's just being able to, I think at this point we were walking up to the car because it had just arrived and we're like, oh, it's really cool, it's here. And then I noticed the lines. I thought, this could be a shot. And as everyone was walking, it just happened to work perfectly. And I was like, right, if I get really low, those lines will feel like they're completely pulling you into that moment. And it's one of those I'm constantly looking for these lines that can lead me into an image, because the car is awesome, but in terms of storytelling, it's only ever going to be 25% of the story. So it's everything else around, which is the for me, the exciting thing to do with it. So it's funny. The cars are never the most, I mean, obviously the most dominant subject because they are the subject, but then in terms of actual placement in a picture, it's very rare that they are the full everything in my image. It's it's just not the way I like my own images to be. I often throw in a lot of foreground as well, or I like my own inspirations, people I'm inspired by and their work are people that follow kind of quite linear grids and lots of flat lines and horizons, and I just like that for me is something that makes me, I'm like, that feels nice more than anything. It's more of a feeling than an actual decision of I'm going to have this. But it's I mean, we talk about golden ratios and rule of thirds and all of those easy technical things, but they work, and it's often you don't have to think about them, you just end up doing them. They feel right more than anything. And I suppose that's what a lot of my work kind of revolves around.
And one of the things I was going to ask about this shot here is this isn't a particularly easy shot to take or easy shot to focus, because there's so much foreground. Again, the car's taken up such a small area of the shot. This was taken on a Z9.
Yes.
Do you think that because it's so low to the ground, the use of the screen helped you? And also, were you using vehicle tracking at this point?
I think I from the point of the shoot starting, I switched on vehicle tracking
and then
never took it off.
Okay.
But I mean, you know what? This one is probably a little bit easier than. Sorry, I'm going to be a pain and ask if you can go back to the first shot, because when it comes to the car-to-car tracking, any of these shots, that is where the vehicle tracking for me is the best thing, because when I've got like the shot that the low one with the car in the upper part of the frame, you can flip the screen out and then I can tap my subject and that's easy. When I'm hanging out of a car going I don't know how many miles an hour around a track, trying to get composition, trying to not fall out the car, trying to make sure my driver's shouting at me something like, where do you want them? So you've got all these things going on, and I just think, okay, I just need to make sure I've got this shot here. So usually my arms are the thing that are sticking out more than anything. So I've got a seatbelt on in the car, and so you've only got a certain amount of movement. So being able to have, especially for example with the Z9, instead of having to shoot completely blind and think I will just point, hope for the best, which is what you have to do a lot of the time, because especially when it gets to some of these shots where I'm quite wide from the car, and also in some other shots quite low, I physically can't see what I'm doing. So having the screen being able to kind of flip out, and for me to be able to see, it's gonna look all right. And also the same with social media now. A lot of my clients are saying, can we get quite a few more images portrait, not just landscape? That has been something that I've struggled with in the past, because again, I've just literally doing these kind of shots can't see what I'm meant to be shooting. So having the Z9 the screen can pivot multiple ways, and I'm like, that was one of the things I was really excited about when I experienced it. Like when you get the camera out of the box and you're like, this is cool, it's nice, but when you get to the point where you're actually doing your job and you're like, oh, this is really cool. This makes my job a lot easier. And that was really cool, especially, you know, when you've got your second grip and I can hold it, the camera, to the point where I'm like, this is a doddle. My hair flapping everywhere as I'm trying to get these shots.
At like 69 an hour, you know, it's fine.
So yeah, being able to visually see what I'm shooting and to have the vehicle tracking helped me. It literally, in terms of my focus, it just made things so much easier to be able to get these shots. And precisely as you said, it's not suddenly trying to think I'll focus on the foreground or anything like that. So that was super helpful.
Going back to one of those subjects we were covering earlier, we were obviously talking about color on flat grey days, right? And you try and look for a pop of color. But what happens in those low light situations? You know, like there's a couple of shots that we obviously have in those low light situations. So I'm just going to jump to. We'll start with this shot here first.
Yes.
So there might still obviously be light around you, but there's not really a lot of color, and there's not really a lot of light. Just talk me through, you know, your thought process when you're in that low light shooting situation.
Well, I'm always looking for. Sometimes, I mean, subjects will just almost appear, but that's when you rather than like I will never say necessarily, oh, could we just, you know, set this up. For me, it's just not the way I like to work. Yeah. So I think we were moving the car around at this point, and I was I remember he was driving up towards the camera, then parking up, then we were reversing back to get a couple of video things, I think is what we were doing. And as he was parking, he was just sat there just looking around. I was like, oh, that's a really nice shot. So again, with the subject tracking, I think I had my camera on auto subject tracking because shooting cars and people all the time. And I thought, I'll just see, especially I wanted to test, you know, having the camera in my hand for the first time, I wanted to test how well it could subject track the car owner's eye. And then as I put the camera to my face, and I thought, wow, it can see. It can see.
I can't.
It can. Yeah. And so I got these shots, and you have your little bit in the screen that shows you, I don't know what the technical term is, the little
AF point.
The AF point. That's the one. The little dot, which was like, oh hey, no, I've got his eye. I can see that, and I was like, that's really cool. So, looking in terms of light as well, I had that one light, which was actually that big circle is the Lotus like sign, lit sign. I thought, okay, that's getting some quite nice light just behind his head, and you can see the shape of his head. And then he had in front of him like a street lighting bit that was really gently lighting his face. And I thought, that's probably going to be enough. And I think I took 2-3 shots, and then he kind of noticed me, and he was like, "Oh, hi!" And, you know, suddenly not that moment, but you know, this isn't him posed. He's just waiting. And so, I've been on shoots where it's been difficult for me, but I've been really happy with a shot where a similar kind of situation, photographing a racing driver in racing cars, they don't always have windows. They have like perspex with like basically like a hole through that you can slide a little tiny shutter to open that. So I was photographing this driver through this little bit of a hole, and he just literally had got a little bit of light in his face. And to be able to know that at the time I managed to get that shot quite happily, but it was not easy necessarily. No. I thought there's a good chance I'm going to miss this. And so when I saw I got it, I was like, yes, I got it. So to know that with the Z9, I'll be able to think, oh, I've got this. That's going to be a really nice, when I get to be able to play with it more, that's going to be really lovely to be able to know I've got that kind of as my, I don't know, just my sidekick. I'm going to be able to shoot these images that I love with more ease and not have to think, you know, we've all got the shots where we wish we'd got it in focus, or we'd got the right exposure or whatever, and we look at it and we're like, oh damn, I missed that. And so you know, it sometimes breaks my heart, because I think that could have been one of those like portfolio shots, but then you miss it because of either a silly technical detail, like, you know, especially with cars, sometimes I'll be shooting inside a car or inside a garage, and then I'll turn around and something will be happening just outside, and you try to change your settings quickly, but you might just miss it, or you just don't realize, and then you look and you're like, oh, I missed that, or I misfocused or whatever. So I'm really excited to be able to, especially with low light things, to be able to experience the Z9 more, to be able to just the ease of it is just going to, it excites me. You can hear from my voice the minute I think, oh, this is going to be really exciting. I'm going to enjoy this.
And so one of the questions that, I have an interest in general is in those low light situations. So if we jump to this shot here,
Yep.
How are you in a scenario where if you're working with headlights in a low light situation, you've got all this light and then all of a sudden you've got no light.
Yes.
Is that something you're consciously thinking about?
Yeah. It's it's not too much of an issue when you've got classic cars because the lights are not very good anyway.
No, okay. Yeah.
But I mean, it is a problem when it comes to modern cars because shooting with some of these modern cars, the lights are incredibly good, and the minute that you have the headlights on, you're like, that kind of completely blows my shot out. So you either have to angle yourself with the car in a slightly different way, or do things like just put their daylight running lights on and keep it like that. Because I mean, the great thing about shooting in RAW and the Z9 in itself, the minute you load into your photograph up, you can just play with everything. So being able to know that I can knock those headlights back and then bring out the darkness, and it's not going to affect the quality of my image too desperately, is something that it makes me shoot with a lot more a bigger sense of calm. Because I know that regardless of how the other thing about doing the job that I do is there's often points where I will usually underexpose a shot purposely because I think that I can always bring it out from the depths rather than light. But sometimes I'll really underexpose a shot. I'm like, ooh, that was a bit low there. I wonder if I can bring that out. And it's really nice to be able to just get into editing and think, oh yeah, that was fine. I don't know what I was worried about. So, but it can sometimes be a problem. But also trying to make sure that you can still understand what you're looking at without having to worry too much about the lighting situation, because I don't use any artificial lighting, and so I'm always relying on what I've got around me. And I mean, sometimes if I have to photograph a car in low light, you end up just making sure that you are hanging around certain aspects of light. So I did a shoot once where I was asked to photograph this car in Christmas lights. So I made sure that the Christmas lights that I found were the kind I thought, they're quite nice. But it was difficult because I had light I could not move. And in some cases, it's always backlit on a building with a car in front. So I'm thinking, okay, well, how can I use that? If I can shoot from the other side, and trying to work that out can sometimes be quite difficult. But it's, with the level of headlights as well, it can sometimes be a challenge for sure, but I think that's where the RAW technology for me, and these cameras is where you feel the safety in that, because you're like, it will be fine. It will be fine. I don't think I've ever had a point where I thought, that's not cool. So it's if on the screen you're like, okay, that's not working, it won't work at all. So you can modify what you're shooting at the time of shooting to know that you're going to get the best outcome.
And so, you're talking a lot about you're using the Z9, you're relying on the features that are in the Z9. Obviously, you've been able to shoot with the Z9 for a couple of days. And then since then, you've had to go back and do your normal day job.
Yep.
And obviously, you shoot D850 and D6 normally, right?
Yes.
So has there been some times where you thought to yourself, oh, actually, you know what? I kind of want a Z9 here, or is it that you've just kind of settled back into your old camera?
Nope, it's you've destroyed me by.
I apologize.
I've wanted to. Yeah, since then I thought, if I had the Z9, this shot I would have been able to get so much easier. Like standing on the side of a road, and I'm wanting to follow a car the whole way around, and rather than having to either just focus on the whole image as almost like a flat, to being able to say, no, I want you to focus on that first car and just ignore the rest, just follow that car, because you can choose the focus point you want it to continue following. I thought that would be really handy right now. Could have done with that. And then also for a big one for me, and I think this is going to be it's taken me a while to get my head around this, but shooting with I do shoot with the Z7. But only in certain situations as well. The silent shutter shooting, I think, is going to change the way that the images that I get, because often I will only get one shot to get a photograph of somebody if I'm in that same space, because they hear the shutter and suddenly they notice you and they turn and it changes the moment. So you kind of have to make sure you've nailed it. So that can sometimes be difficult, and that's a lot of where I miss some of my shots, because I think they've noticed me too soon, or it's I'll always talk to them afterwards as well. I'll say, oh, yeah, I've just got a really nice shot of you, but it's especially if they're like, what's she taking a picture of me for? But having the silent shutter from the Z9, I don't think on this shoot I had it switched off at all. So I don't think I had a shutter noise at all. And it took me a while to get used to it. But once you're used to it, now I'm almost like a bit surprised. I'm like, oh, it's still got a noise on my on my D6 or, for example, or D850. So I do like being able to feel a little bit like I like to shoot almost fly on the wall. So I like people to kind of ignore that I'm there, and I'll just get what's happening. And it is difficult when you're trying to ignore the fly that's going click, click, click.
Yeah.
And so that's something I'm quite excited to use as well. So I'll use more of. But yeah, it's going to change the way I shoot, I think, quite dramatically.
It really just allows you to kind of blend into the background, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's actually a really interesting point, that, like you say, that there's nothing that the camera's done wrong that means you've missed your shot.
Yeah.
But just because of the nature of a DSLR,
Exactly.
that noise is kind of...
It's the noise that we've had for, years and years, probably since the initial, birth of photography, when there was no noise, when there was no mechanical shutters, to this middle bit. And then I think the future will go back to not having any noise.
Yeah.
And I do think that's going to change the way that that people are able to get photographs. And I mean, certainly for me as well, it's sometimes a bit unnerving initially. People are like, are you taking any pictures at all? And you're like, oh, yeah, I am.
Are you doing anything?
Are you doing a job? And so, but at the same time, for me, it's nice just to kind of feel like I am slotting into that moment and not disturbing it or as little as I can, because I want it to be a moment that is as true to that moment as possible. So yeah, having that is definitely something that I'm excited to use more of.
And obviously we mentioned you're a D850 and a D6 user, and every time I see you, you're always two bodies.
Yes.
You've always got one body on one side and another body on the
Yes.
other. Do you think that you're going to go to two Z9s, or have you not decided yet?
I haven't decided yet. However, I was talking to somebody yesterday and I thought, you know what? Do you think this will be a good idea? And they were like, yes. And so I trust that person a lot. So I think I probably will end up going to it. But as any form of change, I want to make sure that I'm completely feel at home with any new technology that I use at all, whether, that's new cameras or new laptops, whatever. You have, especially doing it as your job, you think I need to do this slowly because I need to make sure that I can do this. So I think I will, the minute that I can get my hands on a Z9 for my professional use, I will use that. The problem is I don't know which one it's going to replace, the D850 or the D6, because I love those cameras. So, but I do know that the Z9 is going to become my new favorite child. So I might just like swap them out a little bit and see.
I mean, because specification wise, it takes the best of a D850 and the best of a D6
Precisely.
and kind of puts them together, right? So,
So I do think within a year, or however quick I can get my hands on a second body, I think I will end up shooting both. Yeah, I don't know what I'll do with my old cameras, because I genuinely love them. They're covered. I suppose that's the other thing I'm quite looking forward to with the Z9. I'd like batter my cameras. They not out of like, oh, what are you doing
on purpose?
But the job that I do, I'm half clambering up hills and like rocky bits to try and get a higher point to shoot cars come around a corner, or I'm shooting in wind, sand, rain, snow. I'm not kind to these cameras, and they have got all of these scars all over them from these adventures. And so like I've got on my D850, it's got a completely lost its black colouring on the top, because I had it around my body when I was riding a motorcycle for 1,500 miles on a shoot, and it's just rubbed on the top of the tank, and I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry, camera. And so and it's the Z9 I am going to put through its paces as well, because it is something that it comes on these adventures with me. And
I think I've had the privilege of seeing your D850, and it does look like a piece of art. So I definitely think you should definitely keep that. Yeah, just because of the stories that body's tells you about how you've used your camera as well.
Yeah,
So,
I had to when I sold my D5 because I got the D6. I was sad to see it go because I had I got that little crack on the screen like 3 days after getting this camera. I was like, at the time, I was livid with myself. I was like, damn it, I didn't even manage to get a week into it. And then but at the same time, you end up having these stories. And you're like, I did that bit on this shoot, or it's the same with humans and scars. You're like, oh, I had a really good adventure with that one. And so it's exactly the same with your cameras if you're shooting with them all the time. And I mean, it's the Z9 I will put it through its paces, but I think it's going to look, I mean, I love the styling of it, and I think it's going to look, with a few more scratches and batters on it, it's going to look like a real great piece of art.
and at the end of the day, for you and for a lot of photographers, a camera is just a tool, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there will be a lot of photographers who are like, oh no, I have to try and make sure it's pristine and look after my camera. And I get that. Yep. But there's also a lot of photographers like yourself that, it needs to be used. And if it gets a couple of scratches, it just adds to the story of that camera, doesn't it?
Yeah,
so,
precisely.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just end up not seeing them. And it's not until somebody points it out to me saying, wow, your camera looks really battered. I'm like, oh, but it's great. It does a great job still. So.
Yeah. Inside, it's fine.
Yeah. So no, it's, back to your original question, I do think within a year I will probably have 2 Z9s swinging around me. So yeah, I am excited. I'm really excited for it.
So I'm gonna bring this to a close.
Go for it.
But I've got one final question for you.
Okay.
And I'm sure this is a question you probably had from a couple of other people as well. But what would be the model of car if you could choose any car to photograph?
Oh my goodness.
Like the dream.
The dream would be, and it's kind of a cheat because I saw a similar photograph that somebody else had done, and I was like, I want to do that. Would probably be, I'm going to go, it's a bit of an obvious choice, but a 250 GTO Ferrari, because it is one of the most beautiful cars. It's a very obvious choice, but I'd love to take it somewhere snowy. I want to go and do a snowy alpine road trip, and I don't know, put some studded tires on it and literally go and take it out in the snow, and just on some, having this bright red pop of color in this snow would be, I just think from a road trip point of view, just something really truly magical. I mean, it's meant to be a racing car, technically, but at the same time, I think just that complete opposite of worlds, I think would look really, really cool. So something along those lines. Or it doesn't even have to be out of the country. I'll take one to Scotland. If anybody wants to lend me a GTO, I'll take it to Scotland. You just let me know. So that would probably be it.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with snow tires on a Ferrari, right?
No, I know. I see it done all the time.
But like that thought process is a really interesting thing, because a lot of people, when they think of a Ferrari, they might put that in a situation where it's like next to a sunset over a cornfield in a really warm high temperature climate, and then the first thing you want to do is like, I want to put it in the snow and have that real big pop of color and shoot that different stuff. And I think that's a really great testament to your style of photography. Thank you so much. So that would be the dream. I mean, if I can't have a 250 GTO, I will take a short wheelbase Ferrari. Anybody who has got one going, so I will take that just in case. Yeah. Well, Amy, thank you so much.
Cool.
Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you found this chat useful, and see you soon. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.